Salanoia.The, also known as Durrell's vontsira, is a Madagascan mammal in the family Eupleridae of the order Carnivora. It is most closely related to the brown-tailed mongoose, with which it forms the genus Salanoia. The two are genetically similar, but morphologically distinct, leading scientists to recognize them as separate species. After an individual was observed in 2004, the animal became known to science, and Durrell was described as a new species in 2010. It is found only in the Eupleridae area. A small, reddish-brown carnivore, Salanoia.The is characterized by broad feet with prominent pads, reddish-buff underparts, and broad, robust teeth, among other differences from the brown-tailed mongoose. In the only two weighed specimens, body mass was 600 grams and 675 grams. It is a marsh-dwelling animal that may feed on crustaceans and mollusks. The Eupleridae area is a threatened ecosystem, and Durrell may also be endangered by competition with introduced species. Taxonomy. An individual Salanoia.The was observed swimming in 2004 by the Durrell Wildlife Conservation Trust during a survey of bamboo lemurs in the Eupleridae area, the largest wetlands of Madagascar. The animal was captured, photographed, and then released, but examination of the photograph showed that it could not be identified with any known species of Malagasy carnivoran. Therefore, two specimens were caught in 2005 by the DWCT. One was killed to facilitate additional morphological comparisons. In 2010, it was formally described as Salanoia.The in a paper by conservationist Joanna Urban and a team of scientists from the Climate, Community and AMP Biodiversity Alliance, Nature Heritage, the Natural History Museum, Conservation International, and the DWCT. The specific name, Durrell, honors Gerald Durrell, a noted conservationist and the founder of the DWCT. Previously, local villages had already reported the presence of a small carnivore in Eupleridae, and it was speculated that the animal was the closely related brown-tailed mongoose. Salanoia.The was placed in the genus Salanoia, which previously included only the brown-tailed mongoose of eastern Madagascar. Durrell shows substantial morphological differences from the brown-tailed mongoose, but the mitochondrial DNA of the two species is very similar. The discoverers chose to recognize the Eupleridae population as a separate species in view of its significant morphological differentiation. The observed morphological distinctiveness might be a result of adaptations to life in the Eupleridae wetlands, similar to the Eupleridae bamboo lemur species, Haplima eupleridensis, which is also recognized as a distinct species despite being genetically close to the more widespread Haplima griseus. Description: Salanoia.The most closely resembles the brown-tailed mongoose, which is a small, gracile mongoose-like carnivoran. It is reddish-brown overall, paler than the brown-tailed mongoose. The head and nape are speckled. The underparts are reddish-buff, not brownish as in the brown-tailed mongoose. Most of the tail is similar in color to the body, but the tip is yellowish-brown. The inner side of the well-furred external ear is reddish-buff. The broad feet are naked below, with the naked skin buff on the forefeet and dark brown on the hind feet, and show prominent pads. Each of the 5 digits on the fore and hind feet bears a long, dark brown claw. There are rows of stiff hairs along the outer margins of the feet. In contrast, the brown-tailed mongoose has narrower feet with more poorly developed pads. In S. durrelli, the fur is long and soft. In the holotype specimen, a female, the head and body length was 310 mm, the tail length was 210 mm, the hind foot length was 66.8 mm, the ear length was 17.5 mm, and the body mass was 675 grams. In another specimen, a male which was captured and released, the head and body length was about 330 mm, the tail length was about 175 mm, and the body mass was 600 grams. Based on these limited data, S. durrelli may be slightly smaller than the brown-tailed mongoose. The skull generally resembles that of the brown-tailed mongoose, but the rostrum is broad and deep, the nasal bones are broad and short, and the region of the palate is broad. The mandible is robust and shows a high, steeply rising coronoid process. Statistical analysis of measurements of the skulls and teeth strongly separates S. durrelli from specimens of the brown-tailed mongoose. Salanoia.The has a more robust dentition than the brown-tailed mongoose. The teeth have larger surface areas. The first and second upper incisors are smaller than the third, which is separated by a pronounced diastema from the canine tooth. The canine is more robust than in the brown-tailed mongoose. The first upper premolar is small, but the second and third are larger. These two teeth are shorter and broader than in the brown-tailed mongoose. The fourth premolar is large, as is the first molar. The second upper molar is less than one-third the size of the first, and is more highly reduced than that of the brown-tailed mongoose, which is about two-thirds the size of the first molar. The first lower incisor is smaller than the other two. The lower canine, premolars, and first molar are well developed. The second molar is broad, but smaller than in the brown-tailed mongoose. Distribution, habitat, and behavior. Salanoia.The has been recorded at Andraba, a marshy area at 750 meters above sea level on the eastern coast of Lac-Aléotre. The nearest occurrence of the brown-tailed mongoose is about 55 kilometers from Aléotre. The first observed specimen was swimming. It may have fled from human activity on the shore. The two others were caught on mats of floating vegetation. Thus, S. durrelli occurs in a marsh habitat, quite different from the forest-dwelling brown-tailed mongoose. S. durrelli may use its robust dentition to feed on prey with hard parts, such as crustaceans and mollusks, in addition to small vertebrates, rather than the insects that the more gracile-toothed brown-tailed mongoose eats. Indeed, the two specimens of S. durrelli were captured using traps baited with fish and meat. S. durrelli is similar in many respects to the larger mainland African marsh mongoose, a carnivorous wetland dweller that also uses mats of vegetation to eat and sleep on. Conservation status. The unique habitat of Lac-Aléotre is threatened by pollution, destruction of marshes for the construction of rice fields, overfishing, and introduced species such as exotic fish, plants, the black rat, and the small Indian civet, another small carnivoran. A bird restricted to the area, the Aléotre grebe, was declared extinct in 2010, and the population of the bamboo lemur fell by about 30% from 1994 to 1999. As a narrowly distributed species with a small population, S. durrelli is likely to be threatened by degradation of its habitat and perhaps competition with the small Indian civet and the black rat, but its conservation status has not yet been formally assessed. The DWCT is working to conserve the Lac-Aléotre area, and the region has been designated as a protected area.